Hey, it's Uad here. Welcome back to the Mixing in a Home Music Studio course. In this video, we're going to talk about plugins. So firstly, if you're new to my channel and new to my videos and you like what you see, please click the thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, click the notification bell to be notified of all my future videos. So plugins, this is a pretty hot topic when it comes to mixing. Most people that do mixing love plugins. They love buying plugins, they love collecting plugins, they're always looking for new plugins. What are plugins? Right, so in the previous video we talked about inserts. And I talked about inserts as a place to put plugins. And that is true. Plugins are generally what they're technically supposed to be third-party products that you can purchase, and they can be plugged in to the mixing software. Now, generally, most of us generalize and call plugins anything that we open in a separate window, which could be inbuilt in our mixing software. We'll still sometimes refer to them as plugins. A lot of the time because we load them in inserts, right? But technically they're not plugins because they came with the software, right? So it depends on how you define it. But it's a concept that allows, say, the developer of the mixing software to not have to overload their software with every feature and every possible thing that, you know, somebody mixing would want, and then having their software be $5,000 a license or something like that. So they can keep it a lot smaller and keep the cost down and allow you to go and select what features you want to add and buy these plugins separately from another developer. And, you know, or even the same developer, but add them in later as you choose, and pick and choose. You know, if you don't need that feature, you don't install it, right? So that's sort of what a plugin is. Now, we can get plugins from lots of vendors, tons of them, right? They're all over the place and they're all making good money from it. You've got people emulating vintage hardware from years ago so that you can get that, you know, vintage sound. You can sound like the Beatles, you can sound like this, you can sound like whatever, right? So there's all of those type of things. There's also, you know, weird and wacky sounds, right? You can get things that make really interesting sounds, changes the audio to be this or that, you know, and you've got like tuning things, so you can tune your vocals with things like auto tune, all that sort of stuff, right? These are all plugins. Now, plugins come in many formats, and depending on your system, depends on what you're going to buy. You know, there's ones called VSTs, there's AUs, there's AAX. Now, if you're a Pro Tools user, you're going to want to buy AAX plugins. If you are a PC user, you can buy VSTs. You can buy AAX again if you're using Pro Tools on a PC. VSTs if you're using like Cubase or Studio One or anything like that. If you're a Mac user, you can buy VSTs if you're using Logic or Cubase or anything else on a Mac. You can also buy AU plugins in all of those software again. You cannot use VSTs or AUs in Pro Tools, I think, up to this stage, or you never used to be able to unless they've added that feature. They specifically wanted to only use AAX, which was basically a proprietary for Pro Tools. All the other manufacturers, the developers, basically allowed VSTs across the board, so they're pretty generic. But you're going to go to different vendors' sites and all that sort of stuff to buy these plugins, and make sure you download the right version and the right feature and all that sort of stuff for your software and install it. Then you can load it into your inserts and, you know, use it as you so desire. They've all got different licensing systems as well. So you've got things like iLock, you know, you might just license with a serial number over the internet. You know, there's many ways that these plugins get licensed, but obviously, you know, you're looking at purchasing, you need a license to prove that you purchased, and then the plugin will work, that sort of stuff. Anyway, let's get into some actual real world and have a look at how it looks in Cubase and give you some examples and that sort of thing. Alright, so the first thing I'm showing you here is that this is the plugin manager in Cubase. Alright, so I obviously use Cubase System, and Cubase allows you to install VST style plugins. Now, there can also be a difference depending on whether you're on a Mac or a Windows box. Now, I'm on a Windows box, okay? So for me, with Cubase and Windows, the prime plugin is VSTs. And then on top of that, there's different versions as well. So we'll go into that in a minute. If you're on a Mac, you also have the option of installing an AU plugin, okay? So, but AU plugins are only supported on Macs. If you're on a Mac, you could also install a VST. Okay, now I'm not 100% sure of which one is better for you to install, whether it's VST or AU. All I can recommend is that you try them out, see which one works more, which one's more stable than the other. Some can not be stable and can cause crashes in your software. If that happens, try the other one, see if that works better. So I'm going to show you an example of a plugin here, which is just a demo. Okay, so this is a plugin. It's a reverb plugin from Valhalla, and I could download a demo, and there's a Windows version, and now there was obviously a Mac version. I've downloaded Windows. So when I go and install this, which I have already installed, but I'm going to show you the front end, you'll see these selections here. Now sometimes these will be included in the one download as is shown here. Other times you might have separate downloads to grab. Now I'm just going to explain the differences between these. So 32-bit and 64-bit is it's sort of basically what your DAW or your PC can support. Now majority of PCs and DAWs today, if you're up to date, will support 64-bit. Now, even so much as Cubase, they've actually stopped supporting 32-bit, so they won't support the old ones anymore. So some people have some very old plugins that they love and have never been updated by the vendor, and they're 32-bit, so unfortunately they don't work anymore, so they've had to lose those sort of plugins. So in my case here, I would untick these and I would install the 64-bit VST plugin, because that's what Cubase supports, that's what it likes. There's no point. I could install the other ones. It would do no harm other than to put extra files on my hard drive that I just don't need. So if you're Cubase, that's what you would go for there. If you were someone like Studio One, I would suggest you're probably doing the same, 64-bit. Okay, 64-bit is going to be better than 32-bit if your system supports it, so I would go with that all the time. Obviously, if you find you have a need to install the 32-bit version, then do that, that's fine. It's not going to affect anything. People ran with 32-bit versions for years. It's only, the last couple of years that we've really been running 64-bit. Now these two last ones here are specific to Pro Tools. Right? None of the other vendors will support them, none of the other DAWs. So all the DAWs out there are going to support VST or AU if you're on a Mac. If you're on Pro Tools, they do not support VST, which a lot of people are annoyed about that they won't. They won't support AU. They will only support RTAS or AAX. Now, going even further than that, RTAS is only supported on the old versions of Pro Tools, right? That is the old standard that Pro Tools used to use. So more than likely, if you are fairly up to date or you're not using a really old system, you're going to be looking at 64-bit AAX as your install for Pro Tools. Now, if you run dual systems on your computer, so let's say I ran Pro Tools and Cubase, then I would install both the 64-bit VST and the 64-bit AAX so that this one would work in Pro Tools, this one would work in Cubase. Alright, so if you've got Pro Tools, you need to install AAX. If you've got a really old version of Pro Tools, then you need to install RTAS. And any other DAW that supports third-party ones, it's going to be VSTs or AUs if you're on a Mac. So once you go through that process and install it, it's then going to be in your system, okay? When you install plugins, install them with your software closed, because generally what happens is when you install a new plugin, you fire up the software, your DAW like Cubase, it will scan the folder where your plugins are and will pick up any new ones and add it to its database, ready for you to be able to use. If I was to install a plugin now with this open, I would not find it in the software here because it hasn't scanned. Now I could force it to do a scan in Cubase, but some other systems like Pro Tools, that sort of stuff, may not have a scan system inbuilt and it will only scan on booting up. Now where these plugins get installed is generally in some default locations, but just check where yours go. You may need to include the folders as shown here in the scanning path in your software, or you may want to even go outside of what the default install location is and install all of your plugins in a central spot. Like here I've got CVST plugins, you might want to install all of them there as opposed to under these hidden sort of subfolders that are built into the Windows system itself or the Mac system, wherever that's installed. Now the VST system, from my understanding, was developed by Steinberg, and over the years they've released different versions as well. So you'll see here in my list here that there's all these VST plugins, and you'll see a whole heap of different versions. Okay, now the main two versions that are going around at the moment, just exclude the sub numbers. I'm not sure the relevance of that and how much impact that has, but mainly what we're looking at is VST2 or VST3. So VST2 is more supported broadly across all of the systems, all the DAWs, and VST3 is a new one that Steinberg or somebody developed and is supported in Cubase heavily. A few more features like automation and side chaining features. So if you get the option of VST2 or VST3, check your DAW to see which one it supports. If you're running Cubase like mine and it supports VST3, install the VST3 version. It's the better version, okay? You assume newer means better, but it's not always the case. Some systems, some plugins will try to install both versions, and I try to avoid that where possible. Other ones won't even give you a choice, so some vendors haven't even developed VST3 plugins. They're still only writing in VST2 mode, so you don't really get a choice. But where I do get a choice, I will always go with VST3 as opposed to VST2. Now, as I said, depending on your software there, you may need to determine what the path is for the plugins so that it can find them, and then you'll see there it'll sort it all out. If you're in Cubase, you can do some advanced sorting and things like that, but I'm not going to go into that at the moment. But once it's all in there, if you go into one of your tracks and you sort of open it up, you can then load any of these plugins that are on here, so that have been installed. So for instance, the one that I was showing you, I could click on that, and this is the third-party plugin that I was talking about, which is a reverb, and that's the plugin that I installed. I load that up. It now will work within my system and generate reverbs on that system there. Alright, now as for purchasing, etc. As I said, there is tons of vendors out there. I've got a few tabs here for some major vendors. So we've got Waves, do a lot, and you can see plugins, right? So if you go in here, you can click on plugins and they will give you a list of lots of plugins, and obviously they've got some things on sale now for $29, but you can pay $250, you can pay more. Some of the plugins can be thousands of dollars depending on how advanced the plugin is and what it does and who's selling it. Other ones like Waves can give you specials of $29 on and off here and there, but charge you $199 regular. So you can see you got tape emulators, you got EQs, you know, these are vintage styles, more EQs, that's Waves auto-tune style effect. You know, lots and lots of plugins. Almost anything you can think of, they've got a plugin for. So obviously, if you just want to buy it, you just add it to the cart, pay your money, and then I'll show you the system they use to download in a minute. If you've got a UAD system, so UAD is slightly different because you need their hardware to run their plugins. So whether that's a dedicated DSP box, or whether you've got like an Apollo or Twin, if you have that, then you can obviously go in and you can look at their plugins and purchase any of their plugins, and it's all very similar. You know, obviously different prices, different qualities, different styles, and again, you're just going to buy them and then they will get downloaded in another system, which I'll also quickly show you. Izotope, I love some of their plugins, but these ones are very sort of advanced plugins. Okay, so these are on the higher end, but you've got some ones here like Nectar. Again, just go to their system, buy it, and then you can just click on and download the software and install it, similar to what I was doing with that Valhalla. Plugin Alliance, that's another one again that I buy a few plugins from. They have quite a few little plugins, and when you purchase theirs, you can see here what you get. So here's some options they give you. So they give you a Mac version that you can download. They give you a Windows 32-bit version, a Windows 64-bit version, and some Avid Venue TDM, which I'm not going to go into, but it's special hardware that you've got to have from Avid. So in my case here, I would pick this one, Win64, because I'm running a Windows 64-bit version and my DAW 64-bit. So I would just download that, install it. Okay, so if you've got a UAD system, you can access a little window here from this console thing here. I just right-clicked on it and popped up the UAD meter control panel. And if I click on that UAD button, you'll see here that there's all these plugins. So they include all the plugins in their list. So the good thing about the UAD system, if you do own it, is that you can demo their plugins instantly. Okay, so all the plugins are already installed. You don't need to do a new install. They're included within their main system. The downside to that is when they do an update, you have to update their whole software, and it is a huge download because it includes all the plugins within that one download. It can be like a 2 gig file to download and install when they do an update. But if you wanted to start a demo of one of the plugins, you just click on Start a Demo and off you go. You just then go back to your DAW, load up that plugin, and you're running it in demo mode for 14 days. And if you decide to then purchase the plugin from their website, once you've purchased it, you basically come in here and you just click on Authorize Plugins. It goes and scans your account online, and it refreshes and updates, and it discovers that you've purchased a new plugin, and it will suddenly say it's purchased like this. It says authorized for all devices. And then you're free to use their plugin forever then. And you can demo any at a time at will. So the UAD system's quite nice in that regard, but as I said, you do need the hardware. Okay, so as for Waves themselves, so they actually have an application that you need to download and install, and it's called Wave Central. It manages your licenses and it manages your installed plugins. So once you've installed that, Then you can click on here and go easy install. You can log in. Okay, once you're logged in and you're in here, then what you can do is, so if you want to install a plugin here, you can go to install, and then in this case here we can tick on all Waves products so that we can see the ones that are available. And as you can see, there's a giant list here, so we could pick any of those, click them across, and it's going to then install it. If you only want to install ones that you've bought, then if you just had it clicked on My Products, it will show you what's available to be installed, and you can then obviously move it across here and then click on install, and it will download the plugin and install it to your system. Okay, I'll come back to licenses in a minute. The other one is Izotope have just updated their system, and again they've got an application now called Izotope Product Portal, and you can go and find your plugins in here, and again you can install them where it says install. If it's installed already, it shows installed. So depending on where you buy them from will depend on how you install a plugin and how you actually manage it. Okay, so now licensing is done differently depending on the plugin. There's lots of ways to do licensing, and it drives me insane that they all do it differently. As I showed you here in Waves, they have a section here for licenses, so you can manage your licenses here, and you can have them in the cloud, you can put them onto a USB stick, you can have them on your PC, but you can only have them in one location at a time. So if you want to move them from one PC to another, so for instance, here's my licenses which I have on a USB stick. If I wanted to move them to another USB stick or move them to my PC, what you have to do first is move them across to the cloud, and then once you go to the cloud, you can then drag them back or click them across to another system. Okay, but that's how they manage their licenses. So if you don't have a license installed in here, then you can't access it. The other thing to keep in mind with something like Waves, even though you might see great specials of $29 and that sort of stuff, they do have a it's like a maintenance fee that they charge you. So if you want to be able to keep up to date, you'll see here it says updates available. The reason I'm not updating them is because I haven't renewed my maintenance with them. I haven't paid them a fee, so these will become unlicensed if I try and install the new updates. So I've sort of just left them as is because I'm happy with the way they work at the moment. I don't need the updates, and I haven't paid them the maintenance fee. So that's Waves. Izotope can be managed different ways with their licenses. I actually license them through an iLock device, which I'll go into in a minute. So the one I showed you here, the Plugin Alliance one, they manage all of their licenses online. So when you first install the plugin and you go to use it for the first time, it will pop up and ask you for your account details. You'll put in your account, and it will verify online through the website that you have a license, and it will tick it off. And you'll see here it shows you how many activated devices I have and how many is available to access. Right now, depending on the software, will depend on how many times you can install that plugin and activate it. You can obviously delete activations if you want, but generally you're allowed 2, maybe 3 activations, depends. So that's their one. Obviously UAD, as I said, because it's a hardware-based system and they have their own software, their licenses are managed within their own system as well. So nothing really to worry about other than having your software installed, which you need anyway. The other two main systems, especially if you've got Pro Tools or Cubase, so Cubase has an e-licenser control section, and within here is where you manage your software that you buy from Cubase. So this is going to manage your licenses for Cubase itself or anything else. It can also manage any plugins you've bought from Cubase. If they sell a plugin to you, you can get that on your license key, and this is a separate USB stick which you need to have plugged in to do that license. The other one that was around mainly from a Pro Tools point of view was iLok. Now I still use this because I have an iLok device, which again is another separate USB stick just to manage licenses. They have moved now to a system where you can manage licenses on your PC. You can also manage licenses in the cloud. I haven't done that. I'm fine with the iLok stick. It doesn't bother me. The advantage of the iLok USB stick is that you can unplug it and you can move it to any other system, and suddenly your licenses for your plugins and your software moves with the stick, so you can plug it into any system. Installing licenses on your PC means that they're locked to this PC. If you want to go and work on somebody else's PC, you can't move your licenses over there without manually moving licenses. So it depends how you want to operate. But if I sign into my iLok account here, and you'll see on my iLok, these are all my licenses for different various plugins, and you'll see here's the Izotope software. So I've got that all installed, licensed on my iLok. So if I was to run my software without my iLok device plugged into my PC, none of these plugins would work. They would all stop working because they wouldn't be able to find the license. So whenever you fire up your DAW and run the plugins, they will check for that iLok device to find the license and authenticate that you have a license. So if you lose this USB stick, you lose your licenses. There's going to be other systems that other vendors use as well. Some others are going to have other ways to do it. More will have other accounts online that you need to create, and that's the one downside of buying third-party plugins from lots of vendors, is you've got to have lots of accounts, lots of ways to manage your licenses and get them authenticated and everything else. But once you sort of get used to it, it's not that big a deal. It would be good if they all used the one system, but they don't. So there you go, that is plugins, and that's a bit of a look at it in Cubase. Let me know what you think. Do you use a lot of plugins? Do you buy plugins? Is it an obsession of yours? Do you buy tons of plugins? Let me know what your favorite plugin is. Love to hear your opinion on that one. If you have any questions about plugins or how to get them, how to load them, that sort of stuff, feel free to put them in there. Please don't ask me questions about how to get stuff illegally. I'm not going to entertain that. What you do in your time is yours, but I'm definitely not going to promote that. I believe that developers, they deserve to get paid for what they do. So, but I'm not going to have discussions about it or anything like that. As I said, if you do that, that's your choice. I'm not going to get in your way, but I'm also not going to be giving any advice about how to do that. So if you want to talk about plugins, we're talking about actually purchasing plugins from developers and that sort of stuff. So please don't ask me any questions about how to get things illegally or free, unless they are legitimately free plugins and that sort of stuff. But if you have any questions about how to use them, all that sort of stuff, do put them in the comments. I'll read all the comments and I'll answer as many of the comments as I can, as quickly as I can. If you did like the video, give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, click the notification bell to be notified of all my future videos. Hopefully you've enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching, and I will catch you in the next one.